been all over, and we're just sitting to try and hear some recollections of his life and his history with the game. How are you, Harry?
Fine. Nice to see you.
All right.
Okay.
Can you tell me when you started with the game? What year?
What year? Oh, I can tell you I was 16 years old. I started playing pocket billiards and fell in love with the game right away because it was something I could do and get on a table by myself, basically. And I went the hard road of trying to learn how to make the bridges and the whole thing. And but I had an ability to pick up the game pretty well. So. And I got to playing pool, and then I got into snooker. I really loved to play snooker. And from the 16 till about 21, I got very good and I started hustling and making a pretty good living at it. And finally I got to the point where I couldn't get a game anymore, and then I got interested in playing three cushion by a U.S. Open champion, Bob Amin, who lived in my homeroom. And he got me interested in playing, and after a while, I tried to go back and forth playing both games, and I got very frustrated because the two games take different strokes, and I got very frustrated with that. And a pocket billiards world-class player named Don Tozier, who had trained me a lot playing pool, says you have to make up your mind. You want to be a champion, you have to make up your mind and play one game or the other. And I like three cushion much better because it was, again, the type of game I could get on a table. I did need somebody to play. It was very challenging, and I could practice hour after hour. If you play pocket billiards, practicing by yourself gets to be very boring after a while. So, and that's basically why people get into gambling in pocket billiards. You know, unless they play straight pool. Straight pool is still the artistic part of playing pool, and you know, the challenge is every day. One day you run 100 balls, tomorrow you're coming back to run 101 balls, right? So, three cushion became a challenge for me, and of course it's the only game, three cushion is the only type of game that you have to accept missing in billiards. All the rest of the games, you know, you can have perfect games at it. So it's a different style of thinking. You know the best players in the world average 1 point for each inning at the table. So
Can you tell us who you learned from and who you got a lot of knowledge from?
Well, Bob Amin got me started, and the first person to really start opening my eyes to system play was a guy named Joe Presida, who was a great pocket billiards player and a great three cushion player, who never won either championship, but was capable. He was the last person to beat Willie Hoppe in a World's Three Cushion Championship. He still holds the run for a 5/10 pool table. Finished second to Ralph Greenleaf twice in the Worlds. So he's, you know, one of those guys, unfortunately, deserved to win but never did, right? And he started opening my eyes to, he taught me a center ball bisecting system, which I became the best in the United States using. And basically from his knowledge of playing pool and bringing it in three cushion. And a lot of people get connected into three cushion billiards, get into the English type of thing, putting too much English on the ball, and he taught me how to make shots without putting any English in, and eliminating that one variable. So, and then I went on from there. I moved to Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and I ran into Joe McDevitt, who had taught Harold Worst how to play. And he really started improving my game, thinking about English on the ball and the rotation, speed, all those type of things. The basic fundamentals of stroking the ball. And so I improved quite a bit. Then I moved to California, and I ran into Alan Gilbert. And even though knew I was going to be competing against him, he basically tried to help my game, and he improved me the last part to the point where I became a champion.
Did you ever play against Harold Worst or people like that?
Harold Worst I saw play pocket billiards in Johnson City, but I never did get to play him. And at that time, three cushion was pretty dead during the 60s. Basically, he was one of the reasons people that was killing because he was not an outgoing type person, and people were interested, but he was pricing his exhibitions out of reason, so that, and he was basically into pool. So it's too bad that I never got in. Hoppy and Cochran and Schaefer were all along that age where they were retired and just died when I started playing.
So the best players you've played against are Alan Gilbert and anyone else?
Oh no, the best players I played against is in world class. You know, I played in 4 world tournaments of the amateur class, and naturally Raymond Coolemans has to be considered the greatest player in the history of the game. You know, you look at his records and they're just awesome. You know, and no, he's the greatest player that I've ever played.
What happened during that game or series of games?
Oh, it was. We had a weird game in Buenos Aires in 1980. I'm playing, start out, I'm really pumped up to play well, and I got him 24-21. All of a sudden the referee walks over and stops the game. And of course we're in a Spanish-speaking country and I don't know Spanish, so, and he takes me by the arm, and we're playing this large basketball arena, right? Holds thousands of people. And he walks me all the way down to where all the officers of the Federation are at. And they're carrying on. And the whole thing was I was playing with a toothpick in my mouth. And that looked bad. So, you know, in all my life I'd always played with a toothpick sticking out of my mouth because I need something to bite down underneath the pressure, you know. So my concentration is totally blown. When I come back to the table, I got 3 more points. He beat me 60-27, and
That's a shame. That's a shame.
But that was a new rule that was instituted because of me. They call it the toothpick rule in the world-class play.
Were there any top players you played in Buenos Aires?
Well, there was Coolemans and Yoshiara. You know, my first game was against Kobayashi, who was at that time considered the 2nd greatest player in the history of the game, you know. And one of the things that we're not taught in this country is to be able to play world class, because we don't have the masters here to teach the people, you know. And it takes quite an adaptation for a person, considering a person like myself that only played in front of like 200 people here, and I walk into a basketball stadium where there's thousands, you know, and the opening ceremony was probably the greatest thrill of my life. Was they had each person introduced. Well, naturally Raymond Coolemans was introduced, and they give him like a 5-minute standing ovation. You know, they love their billiards in South America. And then the player from Egypt was introduced in just a few seconds. And then I'm introduced as champion of the United States, and I get the same ovation as Coolemans. And it completely blew my mind. And it was the greatest thrill in my life to be introduced as the champion of the United States. And but then now I got to play Kobayashi, who was the 2nd. I'm scared to death. Right?
And he makes all those umbrella shots on you?
Oh, he's a great, he's a great, awesome player. And the conditions are the 3 tables in this huge auditorium, and every time you hit the ball, you could hear an echo saying, go boing, 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 boing. And the temperature is like 32 degrees. There's no heat in the place, and they just got heaters around the tables, right? And the balls are acting like old ivory balls. They hit like rocks. Well, I was fortunate enough, Japanese players, when everything is not perfect, they don't adapt well either. And Kobayashi was having problems. And I should have won the game, but he beat me 60-59 in 83 innings.
Oh boy. Did he have a run out right at the end?
I missed a couple of shots I had no business missing. I just missed him under pressure and the whole thing. And what can you say? The difference between a champion and a bum is 1 point, right? So. But then later in the tournament, I had my greatest thrill. Was I beat Vandersmithens, who at that time was the world pentathlon champion. You know, in Europe they have all the games. They have straight rail, balk line, 1 cushion, 2 cushion, 3 cushion. They have their tournaments. You can compile your points. And when you become the pentathlon champion, that is more awesome than being the champion of 1 game. And Vandersmithens, who was a young player from Holland, like 23, 24 years old, I was able to beat him, and it totally blew his mind. He made an interview in the paper the next day. He just couldn't believe that I could beat him. So.
Did you have a technique to beat him?
No, yeah, I was scared. Scared to death he was making more billiards than me, so I just went out and won the game.
And what other world tournaments did you play in?
Okay, in 1980 I played in Buenos Aires. In 81 I played in Cairo, Egypt. And in 83 we played in a town in southern France called Aix-les-Bains, city of the Baz. And in 87 I played back in Cairo. And my best finish in the world amateur was in Cairo. I finished 4th in the world.
How about playing Batalis or Delis?
I played both of them twice. My tournament in France, I lost 5 games by the total of 11 points. And the one game I blowed was to Batalis. I hit him 59 to 53, and he got out on me 60 to 59. Next 2 games he went on to be Kobayashi and Kuhlman's, and all of a sudden he's a world-class player. And again, I don't quite get the job done, and nobody recognizes me as being a world-class type player. So it just takes one break, you know, sometimes to a person to gain enough confidence and win the right game for them to jump from one class to the next, you know.
What do you think it'll take for some American to become world class? Besides, Sangley apparently seems to be in a class by himself at the moment. But what will it take to get the other Americans up to at least his level to compete in world championships?
Okay, number one, I appreciate Sang Lee, but I do not classify him as an American player. He's a Korean player. Okay. For people to really get the knowledge and become a world champion in this game, we're going to have more straight rail billiards. You know, basically walking into a pool room today, you see people playing 3 cushion. It's like watching people play chess. You're impressed, but you're very bored because you don't really know what's going on, and you walk away from the game. But when you walk into a room like you do in Europe or South America, and you see people taking 1 ball and hitting the other 2 balls, hey, I think I can do that. And that's basically why pocket billiards has become popular in this country, because people in the United States are not wanting to take on themselves too much to try to learn something to do it. It's got to be very easy, something that they recognize right away. Okay, anybody, I don't care how they hit a cue ball, they can make a ball in a pocket once in a while. Same way playing straight rail billiards, you can take a ball and hit the other 2 balls once in a while. You know? And that's what it needs to be to make the game popular again. Also, there is always going to be a mystique between pocket billiards and billiards. It's basically sort of a 2-class type thing also. People who play pocket billiards are basically looking to hustle people for money. They don't really appreciate the game, trying to become a champion and do it the best that they know possible. It's how much money I can make. Okay, people who play billiards is the artistic part. And they want to, people who play billiards appreciate just making the shot. It's enough payment in its own. Be able to make a nice 3 cushion, 5 cushion, or 7 cushion shot. It's almost like making a trick shot in pool every time you play. You know, and it takes a lot of time. Long time to be able just to play a decent game of 3 cushion. And most people will say, well, what's in it for me? How much money am I going to make? You know, instead of saying, yeah, I'll pay the price. It'd be wonderful just to play one nice game in my lifetime, you know. And we're not raised in the United States. Our culture is not old enough to appreciate things that take artistic time. You know, we're capitalistic. How much money can we make, you know? And that's the reason why certain things that, you know, for instance, we'll say that I'm a Grand Master. I'm the only one in the United States. I got the certificate from the president of the BF USA in 1984, Jerry Young. Okay. Now, if I asked you to become my student, in most cultures, it would be the greatest thrill in your life. Nice. I'd ask you to come live with me, and all we would do was study and play billiards, and hopefully someday you would play as well, if not better than me. You wouldn't say, well, how much money am I going to make at this? Or I'm tied down, I got a family, or I got a job. And that's the difference in the type of thinking. Right. And that's the reason, one of the reasons why 3 cushion billiards is not going anyplace in this country, because it takes that type of commitment. And the people who play the game and have achieved the levels that we have in this country deserve a lot of praise, because basically they've had to do it all on their own. Nobody's helping them whatsoever. They have to work, and they still have to play the game. They get very much back in return for what they do. Basically, just an ego trip to see how well you can do and do the best that you can.
So, are you an advocate of systems? Do you use any?
All my play is system play. I learned from a very young age, going through the Willie Hoppe book and the whole thing. Even though I didn't understand why the 5 system in his book didn't work, I understood the facts that for me to become consistent, that I needed to learn system play.
How many systems do you use?
Oh, I have like 57 of them in my book, but a lot of them I don't use because I've learned over the years that they don't fit into my system, or I've come up with easier ways to do them, and so I don't use them all. The biggest fallacy that people have playing system play is that they try to remember so many numbers and they become mentally confused. You have to learn to organize a system and simplify it as much as possible. When you're under pressure, you go blank. I don't care if people don't want to admit it or not, but you do. There goes those times when you just can't remember. And people basically mentally confuse themselves trying to play the game. Years ago when I started playing the Willie Hoppe book and trying to get on, and I'm trying to memorize every shot and what type of English to put on it. And naturally I'd make mistakes because I wouldn't remember right. Like in '77 I went to the World's Tournament in Tokyo and watched them play, and I watched them use the clock system. I was able for some reason to perceive right away what they were doing, the type of English and the angle that they wanted off. Right away my game improved like 30% because I no longer had to memorize every shot and every English. I had a working system for English, understanding what to do. And also I could make shots that I never made before because basically I had this system working and I knew how to apply it, plus my angles, and everyone, like a golfer, make a shot that I never made before just basically because I mechanically knew how to put it together in my head.
What do you think about the secrets that some of the old masters they took to their grave? For example, some of the who played balk line or straight rail.
It's a real shame, It's an ego problem. That's what it has to come down to, And it's a real shame that they did that because, some of the associations, like the Japanese association, is very strong, and they do not permit the player to be stronger than the game. In Japan, the champion has to go out and teach at a room 1 day a week, free, or else his championship is taken away from him. So they do not. They make the person teach, and share with other people. You know what I mean? And people like Hoppe and Schaefer and those type of people are very egotistical. Even they couldn't let go of it, even when it's 70 years old, we'll say, when they're no longer going to use it, and share it with other people. It's got to be ignorant. It's dumb.
Why didn't they write it down so after they died it could come out?
That I don't know why it didn't happen that way, but that's the reason, one of the concepts why Europe over the years is taking over three-cushion billiards, because basically they believe in sharing and working with each other all the time.
So are there any deep secrets of the game you could share with us now?
Deep secrets? I think basic things that you do anything well will apply to this game, and I think it's like most top people will tell you, people starting out to play and working to become champions, they want to play, they don't really want to be players. And so the thing that you really have to work on day after day after day is those basic fundamentals. Basic fundamentals, because what you're teaching yourself, it's not a matter of how good you see, it's eye-to-hand coordination. And that's what has to work for you. And people refuse to pay that price of practicing day in and day out. And the older you get, you've always got more excuses. I got to do this, I got to do that. And it's very boring to practice and pay the price,
How about the basics, like stance, the kind of cue you use, the bridge, the stroke? Are there any things you can tell us about that are fundamental necessities to at least play well?
Okay, number one, as a cue maker, I think there's only one cue in the world to use, my own cues. So, and I've proven it over the last 5-6 years. In fact, I finished 4th in the world with my cue. And I basically took a house cue and did all the mechanical things to it that I knew that needed to make a good cue play. But I made it very plain, you know. And I have people like Alan Gilbert pick up my cue, and he played with it for like an hour. And he says, wow, this cue really hits a ball. Like, how can something so ugly looking play so well, right? You know, somehow people think because the cue is beautiful, inlay work and the whole thing, that it's a better cue. It has nothing to do with it. So, and I think basically we've run into in the United States people who manufacture cues basically manufacture them for themselves, not for the players. If you check out the old style cues like Hoppy used to use, they had the bigger butt on the end so you could really grab them. You know, cue makers today make them very skinny because it's easier for them to taper the whole cue. I don't believe a cue should be well balanced. I like the weight of the cue in the back end. I think it's simple dynamics. You don't have as much control pushing as you do pulling. So with the weight in your hand, you're pulling it through. And I discovered many years ago that you can draw and follow a ball much better with a butt-heavy cue. And you'll find a lot of top players over the years have liked a house cue for the same reason over a custom cue, because it's weighted in the back end.
That's interesting.
Run the batteries out.
Okay. So, you want to tell us about what you feel is the proper cue and the kind of cue you make compared to what's out there, like like Schuler or Longoni?
They're making a very good cue. You know, for one person to say, "Well, this is the only cue that you use," as a cue maker, I know you look for the basic things in a cue. Like I say, I believe in a cue being butt heavy, but probably the thing that players overlook, and it's a real weakness in the pool players' game, is the stiffness of the shaft. The player in the United States has gotten used to the American taper, which is almost straight back, and there's a big bend in the middle of it, and it's deflecting the ball a lot, where the billiard players and snooker players know that you need to play with more of the European taper this way, say. So that's one of the big weaknesses that people basically want to go by what feels good, instead of logically looking at something and making their mind take over the matter and making it work, you know.
But how do you blend feel with stiffness? In other words, if a shaft is way too stiff, then you lose some feel, don't you?
It's just a matter that you have to get used to it and make it work. You know, usually everything you learn new doesn't feel good. It feels awkward. So, you know, if you go to the right people, for instance, if you came to me and you know that I know what I'm talking about, and if I tell you that's what has to be done, you do it. You do it, you know. And that's the other problem that you have is a lot of people sitting around pool rooms talking to each other, and they get a lot of bad information. And then people basically should be learning from people who are qualified. But it's an inferiority complex or something. They basically want to sit around and talk to their buddy and thinking that they're getting good information from the person. Well, if that person had the right information, he would have become a champion in the first place. So.
Or maybe they don't want to spend the money and the time to go to the right person.
It's funny, you know. Have been teaching for many years, and the difference between men and women. Men are very egotistical. Men say, "Oh, I see what's happening. I don't need nobody to teach me. I can do it myself." But women, basically, when they want to learn something, they pick up a book or they go to a qualified person to learn. So, like 70% of my students are women. You know, and it's too bad that people don't become better students so that they become better players. You know, that's what Alan Gilbert told me about me. He says, "You're a good player because you're a good student. You're always open. You're always learning." And a good friend of mine many years ago struck home with me, Bill Hawkins from Decatur, who was one of the greatest players to watch play the game. He says, "You're a finished player when you're a finished player." So basically, always be a student of the game. There's always something to learn. Nobody knows everything about there is to know. And you constantly also have to adjust yourself to the game. Your eyes are changing, your style of living, everything affects how you play the game. So you constantly have to be a student of the game if you want to keep improving.
Why do you think there's so few women involved in this game?
Probably the commitment more than anything. Plus, you have this thing of the mystique of walking in mostly all men. In some of the countries, like Japan, they have women players and think nothing about it, the women playing with the men. And, you know, it's the same mystique we had in years in a pool hall, that women don't belong in the pool hall. Now that we have family billiard rooms, the women are coming in and playing with the men. And we don't have that same mystique anymore. So women have a harder time paying the price. They have a hard time of focusing in on one thing that they don't want to do well. They like to do this for a while, they like to do that for a while, and keep going on to other things. And, you know, basically women should be able to play as well, if not better than men. You know, but somehow their personality makeup doesn't allow it. Number two, I think most people that play good pocket billiards, and like most sports, you have to have strong hands, strong wrists, and strong forearms. And they develop much better in a man than they do in a woman. Again, we're back to that thing of building yourself up to become a player. Basically, you know, just getting up to play, you know, running 100 games a day doesn't make you a better player. Just like running a 100-yard dash 100 times a day doesn't make you a better runner. You have to do exercises and all these other type of things so that basically someday you do the ultimate game, right?
So someone who wanted to get totally serious about it and had the time and money to commit to it, what program would you advocate for them from day one?
They need to get with a qualified teacher every day. I'd say for at least a half hour to an hour. To get some good basics to start out with instead of fumbling around on their own, because you get on some bad fundamentals, basically bad thinking, and you're just wasting your time. I did it for years with a hobby book because there was some bad information in there as far as the systems and stuff that I didn't understand and things, and I fumbled around for many years until I got qualified people like Joe McDevitt to teach me why the system really worked. And, you know, and you have to get started at a pretty young age, too. Pretty young age. You don't become a world champion starting out at 20, 25 years old. You basically got to start 12, 13, 14 years old in that area, because now you have the time and you're able to make the commitment. And you're not mentally confused with all these other things that we learn as adults. And you get up there, and if you really like it, you'll pay the price, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, whatever it takes. And you have to practice a lot, which is something that you're taught young. As you get older, it becomes very hard to practice, see? And that's one of the keys. Most people who do things very well are basically introverts. They'll do it and do it and do it and pay the price to do it, you know. And and you don't want to practice too much, though. You do want to play people. So, you know, when I was playing a lot, trying to play well, I was putting in 4 to 5 hours a day. Basically an hour a day on fundamentals, stroke and all those type of things. And then I would play somebody 2 to 3 hours, and then basically spend another hour of practicing on the things and mistakes that I made playing that person.
So obviously you have to review what you've done wrong.
Definitely. Your mind is a computer, and that's the reason you have to go over and analyze what you did wrong and why you did it. You have to penalize yourself so that you don't make the same mistake again. Johnny Layton, who was probably the greatest pocket billiards world champion and three-cushion world champion to ever live, he always penalized himself that if he missed a shot, he'd stay and shoot it 100 times before he went home. So if you have that going through your mind, if I miss this shot, I got to stay 100 times and hit it. You make up your mind, you better hit it. So,
how about exercises for one aspect of the game, like speed control, where you're trying to leave, maybe even take one ball and leave it at a certain place on the table? Are those things beneficial?
I think the thing of I like the Japanese style of laying the ball up to the object ball as close as possible, within 6 inches to 12 inches. I think that's enough. I'm an advocate in shooting speed for what the shot takes. So you're liable to see me shoot hard on one shot and shoot easy on another shot. They advocate shooting the correct speed always to the object ball. I value my game as it's a three-dimensional game. See, three cushion gets into to three-dimensional, where you're trying to make the shot, you're trying to play position, and you're trying to play safety all at once. And that's the reason why the really good players usually are head and shoulders above the ordinary player, because the ordinary player can only do two things at once. And there's only one game of pocket billiards that does that same thing, and that's one pocket. So that's the reason why basically you see people that play one pocket, that's the only type of game that they play. See? And it's very hard for the person to push themselves into that other dimension, see. So playing safety is a choice of shots, and it's also shooting correct speed to put your opponent where you want him to and put your object balls where you want to. So it doesn't always call just laying your cue ball up close as possible to the object ball.
And as far as starting out with some straight rail or bulk line experience, where would you recommend someone start and proceed from there?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I never became a better player and struggled so much, because I never had that type of experience. And I started improving when I started reading books like Daly's book and understanding why caroms happen and understanding. I had to learn bulk line shots. Even though I never became a master at it, I used the basic fundamentals within my game so that I could improve. And you have to study it all. Maybe, straight rail is not your thing that you like to do, but you still need to study all those games so that you can become a top-notch three-cushion player.
What if a three-cushion player who's never played straight rail or doesn't even like it, what if he says to you, well, a lot of straight rail shots, you're going 40 feet around the table. Why do I have to learn a shot that goes only 5 or 10 inches and is a delicate straight rail shot?
Because he needs to learn how to aim those caroms. Because a lot of shots are basically three-cushion shots are extensions of just making the basic carom. And why all short angle shots are basically straight rail shots. So usually, if you see a player that plays good short angles and stuff, he is usually a good straight rail player also.
And you're talking about practicing straight rail and then 18-inch bulk line?
Well, I never played that much bulk line. I basically studied some of the shots in three cushions to drive the object balls and nurse them together. Like I said, there's nobody to teach you how to play the game in this country, so you're talking to somebody that's not qualified to offer an opinion on far as playing bulk line. But you do need to study playing straight rail billiards and hit the balls, starting out especially. And I say you don't have to learn how to run 100, because basically you don't want to become a real master at playing straight rail billiards, because it calls for that short, little punchy stroke like playing pocket billiards. And in three cushion you need the long stroke to stroke through the balls. So those are the things that you have to watch yourself. I don't recommend anybody trying to become a straight rail player and a three cushion player both at the same time.
So a little back to the fundamentals. You told us about the cue you use. What about the bridge, the stance, the stroke? What can you tell us about those?
Well, a couple of things that are basically left out of books, and it's seen, most of the really good players know it, but it seems to be a real secret to the other players. One of them, you have to learn rhythm. Stroking the ball the same amount of times, because you're like a machine after a while, and you need that rhythm. You don't want to stroke one time and then stroke 5 times. You're teaching yourself eye-to-hand coordination, and the two have to work together. And you should be able, if I tell you to stroke 4 times one time, if I tell you to stroke 5 times the next time, you should be able to do that. And if you're not doing it, you know that you don't have the eye and hand coordination together. See? And you need that same thing, approaching every shot exactly the same. You need control of yourself. Sometimes you run into a fast player, all of a sudden you find out that you're playing his speed. You need to slow yourself down. Basically, people starting out playing, slow players bother them real bad, because their rhythm is affecting their rhythm. See? They're controlling their game. So you have to learn to control your own rhythm. That's a real secret. And you see it in all the sports, basketball or baseball. They have their rhythms, the players, so they can be able to perform, see. Bridges, very important compared to the type of shot that you're trying to use. Uh, the biggest bridge that causes people problems is what we call the Orthodox American bridge, which causes you to elevate the cue too much, brings you down too close to the table, and you need to learn to bring the bridges up and flatten out your cue as much as possible. You need to learn two types of strokes. Most people just learn one type of stroke, basically the little wrist stroke. Good players learn to use the little wrist stroke, and they learn to use an arm stroke so that you can spin the ball or so that you can follow through. Probably the most misunderstood shot in all of billiards is the follow shot. People fundamentally go at it bad most of the time. That's the reason why you see pool players basically not use it, because they're trying to use a short little punchy stroke, diving the cue down instead of using the arm stroke and following through. But players who play billiards have learned that, and they learn how to follow the ball much better.
How many strokes do you use in your game?
Well, I used to be a pool player, and I punched the ball very bad, and I used to only stroke 2 or 3 times. And I found over the years of stroking 5 to 7 times caused me to sort of get tired stroking, and when I did, I came through the ball much smoother. So, and I change it back and forth, like I say, compared to the players that I'm playing, knowing what you win a lot of ball games just sizing up your opponent, seeing what he does at the table, seeing what his weaknesses are, and you can beat him on fundamentals before you ever play the game, knowing little psychological things. Alan Gilbert's done it for 25 years. He knows how to size up a game. He wins a lot of games psychologically, and he's also the best cue mechanic, like we're talking about, knowing how to use the correct stroke so that he picks up that little extra edge.
As far as the stance, anything you can tell us?
Stance, most people have a tendency to put their weight back on their heels. You need your weight forward, like a golfer or a boxer. You're up on your balls of your feet so that your upper body can move. And I don't believe in being so dead still that your upper body can't move. I think your upper body needs to move some. And your accuracy and delicacy is in this wrist. And when you put your weight back on your heels, it becomes an arm stroke for you, and you lose that.
I've heard that Kuhlmans or Kobayashi, that they use in excess of 20 different strokes when you combine the arm, the wrist, the elbow, and the hand, as far as different timings too. What can you tell us about the need to use some complicated understanding of 15, 20 different strokes?
Well, I think it depends on they've studied the shots enough to know when they need to speed up the rhythm, and they need to know when they elevate and the things that we're talking about. But they're basically using those 2 types of strokes, the wrist stroke and the arm stroke, and the type of bridges that they know they need to go through the ball. It's mechanics, and after a while, I'm sure they don't have it organized down to 20. It just becomes a part of you, of studying the shot, and I'm sure they're into those things. They don't achieve being the player that they are, but the American player doesn't really realize it's there. Weaknesses in like George Ashby or Carlos Hallen is that they only have one type of stroke. And once Alan Gilbert's the one that opened my eyes to that you learn to need to use different strokes for what you want to do with the shot, and it makes you pick up that little extra edge.
What's your evaluation of Sang Lee's game and the kind of strokes he uses, like the upstroke?
Well, number one, he's a very unorthodox player. I don't like his rhythm at the table because he doesn't have a lot of control of his cue. And it showed up like when he played Kuhlman's his 400-point match. First day when he was really nervous, he fouled the ball several times. He shot a lot of shots when he didn't have control. And the difference between the two players in their fundamentals was the difference in the game. Kuhlman's was rock hard at the table, and his composure and everything didn't cause him to lose a few little careless shots during the game like Sang Lee did. I'm sure Sang Lee, as he becomes playing the top world players, will learn some of these things and have better control of himself. he's playing too many players that are not in his capabilities, and it becomes easy for him, so he becomes a sloppy player for that, and it becomes too easy. You know, he needs to be playing strictly world class with Kuhlmans, Delis, all those type of players, and quit playing players that he knows that he can beat for $2 because it's not making him into the world champion that he wants to be. And he has to improve some of his fundamentals if he wants to be a world champion. But he's a very knowledgeable, and he's able to come up with some has a very great imagination for the game, which comes from his straight rail play and all that. And I say the difference between him and Kuhlman. Of course, Kuhlman's over the years. That's what you'd have to part him from the rest. Is his fundamentals, his hardness at the table, is basically stronger and better than everybody's else, which he learned from a very young age.
Do you earn a living now at the game? Did you ever gamble at the game? How did it work money-wise over the years?
Okay, when I started out playing pocket billiards at a young age, I was making a lot of money playing pool and snooker more than anything. And I thought that was hot stuff. Hell, I was making more money than my dad was working a regular job, right? You know. But I found out after a while it wasn't the lifestyle that I really wanted. And when I got into billiards, I found out, there wasn't the money there also. And I guess I was fortunate enough to come in with people that had a little higher values, that becoming a champion is more important than the money. You blow the money, it goes, but winning the championships, And I wanted to achieve something, I think we all do to a certain extent, let somebody know that we were here at one time or another, and achieving a United States championship sort of achieves an immortality for you. And so that's what I always worked for, and I was fortunate enough to do it. And I guess hustling is okay. I just don't. It's a deceivious thing. You're not proud of yourself. You don't walk up to people, and say I make a living hustling them out of their money. It's something that's proud. I teach for a living. I make cues for a living. I've covered pool and billiard tables all my life. Anything out of the game, I've honestly made a living. And I'm probably the only person in the game that does all those things. Very professional.
So you've never had to have an outside job for a number of years?
Well, what do you mean by an outside job?
Unrelated to billiards.
Well, you try to be around it so that you can improve your game. After a while, you get burnout, I think, from being around it too much. But I think you need to be around a pool room to be able to be as close to it as possible and work on your game whenever you have a chance. But you never make the money working in a pool room like you do working out someplace else either. So it's a commitment and a price that you have to pay. So.
You have any good funny stories? You have any funny stories, interesting stories about old timers?
Old timers? Well, let's see. I'd say a funny one would be with my friend Bob Amin, who originally got me started playing. And when I first started playing, we used to play on lunch hours. He spot me 10 on 25 for a couple of dollars, right? Yeah. And I've been playing for about a year. And we had a big tournament in Springfield, Illinois. And we had all what then was considered the really good players like Bud Harris, Don Tozier, Bill Hawkins, Bob Amin, George Penteras, Boston Shorty, all those type of players. Well, the second game, who do I got to play is Bob Amin. And I beat him 50-17. And he picked up the balls and threw them full length of the rooms, saying a lot of profanities. And he took a $300 cue, which back in 1962 or 3 was a lot of money, broke it across his knee, Now he goes out of the room proclaiming to everybody how unlucky he is and other profanities, right? He gets downstairs. And it's the only time in my life I ever saw a person break a cue twice. He took this cue and wrapped it around a Parker meter and busted it again, right? So now 2 weeks later, we go to play in a tournament in St. Louis at Grand and Olive. Okay, and who do I get in my bracket again? Bob Amin. But the first game I got to play is Bud Harris, who is the U.S. Open champion at that time. And this was an old room. It was one of the great rooms built by Brunswick. And where this table was, there was a stairway coming up, and the floor had sunken down. Well, Bud Harris was like about 6'5", and his complaint was tables were never made for him to play at. Always made for little guys, right? So he walks up to this table and the floor had sunk down and it hits him about waist high. He says, "I've been looking for a table like this all my life," right? Okay, so we lag. He wins a lag and he runs 11 off the break. I miss. He runs a 7. He's got me 18-0 going to 35, right? I ended up getting the 17 points before he got out, right? Okay. So now the next game, who do I got to play? Bob Amit. Here he comes. He thinks he's going to murder me the same way. And I beat him 35-17. Bang goes another $300 cue across the knee. Yeah, it was really funny. It was funny. The guy that taught me how to play, maybe out of 20-some games, only beat me one time in Lansing, Michigan by 1 point.
I've heard of another old-timer, Gus Coppolis. You ever met him?
I knew Gus down in L.A. and shot 2 or 3 games with him at Baker's old place. And it was a real shame what happened to him, being killed in a car accident there in front of the place, And but I never did get to see him play when he was a great player. But he loved the game. Every day he was at the billiard room trying. When I met him, he was over 80 years old, and he was still in there every day practicing and loved the game. And he was one of those type of people that you had to know to really like. You know what I mean? And he didn't have time for strangers. You had to get to know him for a while before he'd spend any time with you.
Are there others you have memories of, like in the era of Gus Coppolis?
Well, like I say, most of those players were pretty well gone by the time I got to playing, and it's a shame. I would have loved it, I'm sure. It came along in what we call really a dead ball era, and players like Bud Harris and Jimmy Catrano and Boston Shorty and Irving Crane were considered the top players during those 60s era and early 70s, and basically because billiards was down in this country, and they were only averaging around 750, 800. See, and then players like myself and Ashby and Gilbert and Frank Torres and those type of players, we came along, started averaging 901, and those players dropped out of sight real quick, and got the billiards back on its feet. And of course, players like Coolemans and these guys have taken billiards to, even Willie Hoppy would have had a hard time competing with these people today,
Yeah, apparently Willie Hoppy was known a lot for his defense. So are you saying defense doesn't work much against the top European players?
Oh, they play great defense. Anybody that tells you that they don't, 4 world tournaments that I played in, Coolemans was always number 1, the hardest to score against. Kobayashi was also number 2. Out of the 4, which I'm very proud of, I was the 3rd hardest to score against. And no, they play a complete game. You don't become the player that they are because their choice of shots is always right, their speed is always right. It comes naturally. They hit balls well. They don't run into kisses. They're always managing the balls, and they have that aura about them that if they miss, they're going to run out on you too. So that makes it very hard to play against also. No, they play great defense. Great defense.
So can you give us any tips on defense?
Tips on defense. Well, most people don't understand defense as far as they play soft to the red ball. In other words, putting their opponent at one end of the table and always just lagging to the other red ball. But you can also, when you become very, very astute at playing defense, you play hard to the white ball and can play defense that way. Alan Gilbert is a master at it. And you change games a lot around that way. One time I was playing in a regional tournament about 8-9 years ago in Los Angeles, and I'm playing John Mellenchuck, who is famous for lagging to the red ball. He passes up naturals to lag to the red ball. In the first half of the game, he's got me like 25-15. I'm just barely missing him. We're playing his game. And I'm really getting frustrated. So the second half of the game, I decide to shoot hard to the white. And he thinks I've just given up and freewheeling more and letting the balls go. And he goes along with me, and I end up winning the game like 50-35. See? So it's a very deceiving thing.
If he had stuck with his game instead of going to yours, then you think he may have won?
No, he can't. Very rare a person that has more knowledge and skill is going to lose to somebody that doesn't quite have that skill. And I've always played him since those times and never had any problems with him. But I had to learn how to play the player. everybody has certain players that play well against them. You know, it's like, for some reason, the player doesn't know why the player plays that well against them, except the choice of shots fall into the category that he knows how to make, his style of play, his rhythm, all those type of things. And players that you wouldn't sometimes think are that great a player are a hard player for that player to beat, you know.
I'd heard that Patelis had a hard time against Ceulemans, but an easy time against Blumdahl. Is that correct?
Well, again, I think it'd have to go back to the style of play. I played them both. Blomdahl has a way of getting out and scoring maybe a little bit better than Ceulemans. But over years of playing, Ceulemans is going to beat Blomdahl because of his style and his hardness at the table. But again, Ceulemans finally ran into a player for some reason that the kid performs much better against Ceulemans than he knows how. And it took a long time for it to happen, you know. But Ceulemans finally ran into that guy, and because he does it doesn't necessarily make him a better player. You know, of the two I play, there's no comparison. I think Ceulemans is a much tougher player at the game, much tougher. But the style of play that they're playing in world-class play now falls into his style much better with the 15-point games, the quick games.
Right.
Ceulemans, they play 50, 60 points, dragging it out and controlling the game. Ceulemans is head and shoulders better.
So if and when Ceulemans retires or his game goes downhill, who do you think are going to be the number 1, 2, and 3?
Well, Blomdahl is considered the best player in the world. I don't know Ceulemans has been going through some of those changes that we talk about. He's had a little problem with his eyes, and then he lost confidence for a while. But if you look at his averages, I think he's playing just as well. You know, and none of those players would be there if it wasn't for him. You know, it's like Roger Bannister run the 4-minute mile. Nobody thought they could do it till Roger Bannister did it, right? Today you couldn't even qualify for a high school match, right, running the mile. But it takes that one person to open up those doors for the people. You know, and Ceulemans has definitely opened the doors, you know, and they don't give him enough credit for that, because if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't know what the world is, you know what I mean? And so, you know, they always pay the man his respect that he deserves, because it's going to take a lot of years. Look at how many years that he's won the world championships year after year, playing against the best players in the world, you know, people that average over 1. And the competition is much stiffer. You know, you talk about Willie Hoppe when he won championships. There was only like 10 people in the world who could average 1. And basically most of them were not invited to play in a world's tournament because they were basically run by Brunswick. So, you know, they had to entertain like Cochran or Schaefer. Well, Schaefer was never a 1 player. Cochran was. But some of the top players that they were scared of in the world, they never, because Hoppe worked for Brunswick. They wanted him to be the number 1, see. But Ceulemans, in his era, has seen like 100 people that could average over 1 and win game after win. He went like 14 years before he lost 2 games in a row to a person, which is a greater record than winning world championships. Kobayashi was the first guy to beat him twice finally.
Could someone learn something from, or quite a bit, from studying Ceulemans' book and following his system in the book?
I think no. His book is basically a commercial ploy. It doesn't. It gives you some basics and stuff, but it was basically just put out to make money. Ceulemans is definitely a very good teacher, and if he really wants to teach you, there's no doubt about it, he can make you into a top player. But his book was basically put out for him to make money from all the years that he had won championships, and he felt the world owed it to him. And it's basically like most books; they don't really cover the subject. They just give you pieces and doesn't really sit down and make sure thoroughly that you know what's happening.
So the old cliche, knowledge in the books tends to stay in the books, and
Well, it's an ego problem. It's an ego problem, you know. It's like when most people, I see it a lot in the pocket billiards field. You know, the guy wins a championship, and of course his friend walks up, "Hey, you're the champion now. Let's make some money. Let's write a book. Let's make a video." And of course, the player, his lone thing in life is to be a player, right? So, sure, what do we do? Because the first thing they do is they get out old Willie Mosconi's little primer. It's been famous for 50 years, right? You know, and they basically offer you the same information. Number one, because the guy has not been an instructor. He's basically been a player. It's a totally different field. Any guy that thinks he's a player can teach. He's got a lot to learn. I found that out. You really got to break it down and really know how to answer people's questions. And everybody's different that you work with. What fundamentally works for one person might be a problem for another person. So, okay, number two, the guy is still a champion. He's still a player. So he's not about to give around new information so that his opponents can start beating him. But basically all you do is get rehashed material. So.
Do you have any nicknames? Did you in the game?
Nicknames? Oh yeah, I'm Hollywood Fats. Yeah. My friend, I was Illinois Fats for many years, and then when I went to Hollywood, my friend Arnie Satin, who owned famous pool room in Hollywood and Western, he dubbed me Hollywood Fats, and it stuck with me. Of course, the cliche today is if they name a town after you, the least you can do is use the name, right?
Well, is there anything else you can tell us? Any advice to beginners, to average players to get better?
Average players to get better. Well, it's like I say, they need to spend more time working on the fundamentals, and they need to get with qualified people to teach them what the game is really about, because the game is a game of imagination, and until people open the doors for you and show you what is involved, you don't know what's there. And just getting on a table and hitting balls around is not going to open the doors for you, and you're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time. So, you know, spend the time, spend the money if you really love it, and learn the right way, and let some people really. And the players, if you make the commitment, any top player that I know of, we love to spend the time with you. Probably won't even charge you if they really know that you're interested. Really interested, they want to spend the time. They love the game enough. You know, I heard that, but basically it's the reason because you have so many people coming around that don't really want to pay the commitment, and it's a bother to the person who has paid the commitment. You know, but most top players, you know, you got Kuhlmans, Delis, any of those top players, they're willing to work with you and teach you, and it's their commitment to the game. The player is never bigger than the game. It's always a commitment to the game.
And what do you think it'll take in the States to get the game bigger than it is right now?
It's going to have to be a commitment to playing billiards again. I think pool has to break loose from billiards, or billiards vice versa from pool, and have your clubs and have people working, basically walk in and seeing people playing straight rail billiards and working with them a little bit, and then bringing them along and bringing them into three cushion. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but you know, we're getting the influx from the Orientals and stuff, and opening rooms and those type of things. They're starting to see more billiard rooms, so hopefully. And of course, and then the next problem is how many qualified people we got to teach them. You know, my hope someday is to basically have that ultimate person that I can teach and make into a champion. You know, that's still one of the things I want to do with my life. You know, I'm willing to work with somebody, but they're hard to find. You know.
Especially a teenager who's got other things on his mind. Huh?
Oh, right.
Can you tell us about the difference in the the equipment since you first started in the game? Let's say from the 50s till now.
Okay, well, years ago we had really good cloth on the tables, and then through inflation and everything, the cloth started deteriorating from the manufacturer, and we went through a period there again along in the 60s and the early 70s where the cloth was very bad, and of course it was killing the game also, because I mean you really had to hammer a ball just to get 7 cushions on a table, and so the faster cloth coming back, which Granita did, helped the game tremendously. The plastic ball that we have today is much better than the old ivory ball. From the viewpoint of the room owner, he can afford them compared to ivories. They just fundamentally play better day in and day out, don't get out and around and everything. Sure, there's things you can do with the ivory balls when you really want to make trick shots that you can't do with a plastic ball. But overall, the plastic ball is much better. The lights are much better with the fluorescent tubes today compared to the old days. I think the players, especially the billiard players, have finally gotten into the knowledge of dealing with slide. Is one of the things that people are basically taught in pool rooms, billiard rooms. You know, wait for the cloth to get old before I start playing on the table all the time, because the slide scares them. And so we started using silicone on the tables to make the ball slide and turn and do the action and stuff. and the players are opening their eyes how much you can really do with the balls that way and stuff too. So we're starting to use mechanical things, and players today are better. You know, I get the constant question, why is a Coolemans or player better than the old players like Willie Hoppy? One of the reasons is the the shaft on the cues that we were talking about, compared to using that American taper and using more of the European taper, and going to the smaller tip so that you can control the revolutions of the ball. In the old days, Hoppy used a very big tip and he swiped at the ball, and he wasn't always sure how much English he was getting on the ball. Where Coolemans or Kobayashi, they have the ball broke down to one tip, two tips, or three tips of revolutions of English, and they have much more control of the shots for that reason. And so it has to be from technology also, because the shaft had to be stiff enough so that the tip could get small enough and go straight through the ball like they wanted. So it's like anything, technology and knowledge have gotten better, and the players become better for it, you know.
So you think the smaller tip around 11 millimeter is right?
That's something that the player has to find for himself. I went to a small tip for a while, and then my eyes started going bad on me, and I found out I couldn't go hit the ball as well as I used to, and I went back to like a 12 millimeter and started hitting the ball. So I say anywhere from 12 to 11 playing three cushion with the European taper on the shaft.
And 10 millimeter you think is too small?
Well, I say, yeah, I would. Number one, you're going to have a hard time with your cue holding up, striking big billiard balls. You're constantly going to have to replace ferrules and tips, and when you really get that small, how you happen to go through the ball, it really affects how you hit the ball. So I think, you know, Coolemans, when I first saw Coolemans, that's what he was playing with, like 10 millimeter, and he's up to like 12, 12 and a half now. So over the years, he's found the same thing, that as his eyes goes bad and he doesn't hit the ball as well as he used to, that the bigger tip still lets him achieve what he used to with the really good eyes and the really good stroke.
How about the rubber, the Continental or the San Michel from Europe versus the K55, it's mostly in use in the States?
I think they both can play pretty well. What you do need is you need the guts in the table. You need a good heavy slate. Definitely the 2.25 inch slate is a much better table than the old style tables. Again, I think the biggest thing that we need on the tables is putting the slide, keeping the slide on the tables. Which room owners, you know, basically they open the doors and they're room owners. They do not know anything about the mechanics of a pool or billiard table or how to keep them up, and they depend on their mechanic, who usually basically he just knows pocket billiards. It's become a lost art, really becoming a top mechanic. And I took it up just basically to help my game, and I learned a lot to help improve my game. And but you got to learn how to measure the slide on the table and keep the slide on it the same all the time, just like as if it was new cloth.
Yeah, so I've heard of this Gunk brand silicone spray. Is that what you use?
Any of those brands, you just want to make sure that you don't get the heavy. You want the light silicone. They have two brands now. They have the heavy and the light, and you want the very light. And you just go over the table and spray very lightly on the bed. I don't believe in putting it on the balls because it wears off. Halfway through the game now, the balls start changing on you. Once you keep it on the tables, it stays pretty equal. And the two systems that you use basically to see how the ball is working, you know, nothing is more awkward than trying to teach somebody the 5 diamond system as we know it, and the ball only comes to the 4th diamond. And you guys say, wait a minute, I thought you said this was the 5 system. See? And the basic reason is because you need the slide to make it come back to the 5 system with the proper English on the ball. See? Okay, number 2, you need to put a ball in the middle of the table, shoot to the other end with maximum English, and spin it, and if the ball comes back to about the 1st diamond, you've got the proper slide on the table. And without the slide, you'll find that the ball comes into the middle of the table. So when I'm starting out at a game on a strange table, that's the first shot that I usually shoot to see what the slide is doing and knowing how it's going to affect my angles and my system.
So you change your stroke depending on if there's a slide or not?
I don't change my stroke. I have to change the system and how I play the shot a lot of times. You know, you hate to run into tables that you know certain shots you can't make on the table. An ultimate billiard table should let you have all the shots. You know, the shot that I like to shoot that tells me that the table has everything that I'm looking for, is shooting it off the ball with reverse English and coming around the world backwards off that ball. If the ball turns properly, all the strokes, and will come all the way back with a normal stroke. Usually I got a table that's fast enough and it's got the proper slide on it, and will do the proper English for me.
Is there a table you prefer, like the old Brunswicks or the new this European, like Segal?
No, doesn't make any difference to me. A table's a table. It's equal for both players. Like I say, nobody likes to play on a table that's not level. And I think players like some slide on the table. Even Sang Lee complained this last time he was here that he just shot 2 shots on this table and there wasn't, all the slide was gone. He says this table's not right. I don't want to play on it. But he had to play anyway. They refused to put anything on the table for him. But so it was a perfect example that he prefers slide on a table also. Doesn't take long for a player. That's part of being a player, is sizing up the equipment, what he has to deal with, what he can do with it. You know, just because you like I say, you shoot the 5 system, you know it's supposed to come to 5, and it never does. It's sort of dumb to keep shooting it when you know you can't do the shot. You know, and it's a funny thing. I guess it's like life. You know, sometimes the more knowledge you have, sometimes you're penalized for it. You know, the poorer the table helps the poorer player, and I think you'll find that's held billiards back in this country a little bit too, because the poorer player would like to have the table to be a little unorthodox, not quite do all the things, so that he has an equal chance in the game more. See, the good player is being penalized. All the knowledge and all the skill and things, he can't do it because of the table.
What kind of value is there to learning different trick shots?
Trick shots will teach you to keep working on that shot and working until you can achieve it. A lot of trick shots I don't recommend because a lot of them are foul strokes, forced follows and forced draws. Some of them are foul strokes, and I don't recommend that, except you're going to get into the feel of being an exhibitionist after you've won some championships and stuff. But I've never been an advocate of making a lot of trick shots and stuff. Basic things on some of the trick shots is very important. Kiss shots, things like that, which you can use into a game, you know. And but most of those shots you're never going to use in a game either. That's it's again, we're going back to theory, but you know, Alan Gilbert's theory is that you're better off to have 2 or 3 basic shots, make it 99 times out of 100, than to know all the shots like Robert Burns does, and maybe make 1 out of 10. And a lot of those shots you would not shoot because it's not the proper shot to win the ball game. You have to have control of the balls and just make the basic shots. You know.
Yeah, sure, you get 1 point for a trick shot or a regular shot.
Yeah, right. And usually when you shoot those real hard shots, you know, that's another theory behind playing safety play, is the guy says, oh, he made your shot. And 9 out of 10 times he didn't get any control of the balls. So he made 1 point. It didn't kill you. It's those 5s, 6s, 7s, and 8s are going to kill you. See? And it's the same way with making that low percentage shot, which usually a trick shot is. You just made the 1 shot. Usually you don't have control of the ball, so you don't get any more out of it. So crowd loved it. Crowd loved it, but it's making those little naturals and playing position and everything and running up those numbers. That's what wins ball games, you know. That's what George Ashby said about me. He says, oh, he don't make no fancy shots. All he does is make naturals. But I pride myself on constantly making naturals and having control. You know, and when you watch really good players, they don't do anything fancy. You know, like we were talking about Bill Hawkins. Everybody loves to watch Bill Hawkins play. The cue goes 90 miles an hour. The balls jump all over the table and everything. He's fun to watch, but he never could become a really good champion because of that. And I learned that from Hoppy's book from many years ago. He says, watch the guy that just makes it look so easy at the table. You're not impressed with him at all. He's the guy to watch out for because he has made it look so easy from years of practicing. Nothing fancy at the table.
Is there any particular system when you come to the table, if you want to practice by yourself, a step-by-step system to practice with the right technique or intention?
Usually if you're improving yourself, you should be doing that every day. You should have something that you're working on. You know, just going to the table and hitting balls doesn't improve you at all. It's the worst thing you can do. You're not using any mental control. All you're doing is having a sensation, just like having sex. Oh, it feels good to hit the balls, but nothing's registered. It's the same way people say, when do you learn the most? You learn the most when you're playing bad because you're analyzing. What am I doing wrong? Why ain't I playing well? When you're playing good, it's like you go into a euphoria. It just happens. And when it's all over, you don't really ask Bill Hawkins. He has a high run in the United States at 19. He can only tell you the first shot and the last shot. He don't even remember what happened in between. So you basically, you learn more when you're playing bad than when you're really playing good. And you have to analyze yourself, and you have to be using your mind and working. And that's the only way you're going to improve yourself, is that hard discipline mentally. It's like when you haven't played for a while. Maybe you lay off for a month, you come back playing. First day you haven't set a goal for yourself, right? Oh, I'm just going to hit some balls and see how I do. Boy, you make billiards you can't believe. Why? Because you haven't set any goals for yourself, and you're just going in to enjoy it. Okay, second day now you're coming back, well, yesterday I did pretty good. I think I'll do better today. Boom. Because that mental hardness is not there, and you're not there solving the problems all the time and everything. And that's what it takes, those hours and hours of working and solving those problems and building up yourself mentally so that you're strong at the table and consistent. Coolemans has that. I'm amazed at Coolemans. Coolemans has something that nobody else has. How he can play all these years, achieve all these things, is that still loves the game and can't wait to get to the table and play. Me, I'm burnt out. I retired in May. I have a back problem, and I'm burnt out from playing and the whole thing. So I just decided to give it up. It's no more fun for me. And I never thought I'd see the day. You're talking to a person that if he missed one day playing, it was the end of the world, you know. And but it's happened. But Coolemans is amazing. He's really super amazing.
Well, I think I've run out of questions to ask you.
Well, I enjoyed the interview. Thank you very much.
It was a real pleasure. Thanks for all the information, the tips, and the explanation of your whole history with the game.
Okay, thank you very much.